Now, Bush was informed immediately, and then he took off, not knowing quite where he was then going to go. Now, when was the first dialogue between Blair and Bush, and what was the nature of that dialogue?
Well, of course, Tony told me straight away to try and get Bush on the phone, and we tried, but it was impossible to get through to the White House. You couldn't get anyone. And we got lots of calls from other presidents. I remember President Putin was one of the first to call, then Chirac, and then Schroeder. And we couldn't get Bush all day. He was travelling, as we now know, in Air Force One. We got him the next day in Washington once he returned and spoke to him. And I have to say, he was very shaken. I'm not surprised, but he was a very shaken man on that day.
How did that manifest itself?
He wasn't sure what to do. He was, you know, his voice was quavering. He was in a state almost of shock, I would say.
And we've got this interview today with Tony Blair saying how it affected his leadership. How did it affect him on those days? You saying that Bush was shaken. How was Tony Blair?
The interesting thing about Tony Blair was when a crisis came, he really came into his own. Sometimes he could get a bit bored when things were going just normally, but a crisis like that, he really became very steely, very focused. And I think he was the first on television to express our sympathy as a country, but also the world's sympathy with the United States, and to stand alongside them. And many Americans still remember what he said at the time, and that's why he's still quite popular in the United States, because he stood out there and said what the world thought.